This should scare every Canadian senseless. Stop what you're doing right now and listen close. They're talking about in 2030, this could mean government-funded reports, the use of rolling blackouts or social pressure to conserve energy. So I like how they use this very, very harsh term and idea. The use of rolling blackouts to see energy consumption go down. Are you kidding me? Or social pressure to conserve energy. Well, that's nice. That sounds like, or we'll just socially shame everyone into using less energy. Or if you don't do that, you don't follow along, we may use rolling blackouts to accomplish the reduction. Hey everyone, this is Diverge Media and I'm Greg Staley, and today this is what's in the news. Trudeau has enacted new gun safety measures. Agoraphobic tendencies and phobias are on the rise. There is a Tillsonburg pastor who is continuing to hold services and refuses to shut his door, and he gave his reasons why to Diverge Media. And we go through the Government of Canada's report titled Yesterday's Gone, funded by the Government of Canada's Future Skills Centre. Agoraphobic tendencies on the rise due to social and physical distancing measures. Now, this came out of the Yesterday's Gone report. It was a report funded by the Government of Canada's Future Skills Centre and says that it identifies 8 megatrends with the potential to impact employment in Canada by 2030. The report says that the goal of this research is to explore these technological, social, economic, environmental, and political changes and to inform the design of skills demand programs and policy responses. So it's fairly big idea behind it. They're looking to inform skills demand programs and policy responses as a result of this report funded by the Government of Canada's Future Skills Centre. So in the report, there is another report reference from ADT, and it states that fear of other people is the most searched phobia of 2020 in reference to the United Kingdom. This has led to severe impacts on people's mental health, with psychotherapists in the UK reporting a 200% increase in individuals displaying agoraphobic tendencies. Now, what is agoraphobia? Agoraphobia is defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary as an abnormal fear of being helpless in a situation from which escape may be difficult or embarrassing, that is characterized initially often by panic or anticipatory anxiety, and finally by the avoidance of open or public places altogether. And I definitely can see how COVID regulations would play directly into this. Abnormal fear of being helpless in a situation from which escape may be difficult. It's characterized initially by panic or anticipatory anxiety. The anticipatory anxiety, I find that would be myself included. I get anticipated anxiety before going out often in public. Symptoms of agoraphobia include fear or anxiety about the following: being outside of the home alone, using public transportation, being in enclosed places, stores, movie theaters, etc., standing in line or being in a crowd, being in open spaces like markets or parking lots, being in places where escape might be difficult, active avoidance of all situations that provoke fear and anxiety, becoming housebound for prolonged periods, feelings of detachment or estrangement from others, feelings of helplessness, dependence upon others, anxiety or panic attacks, and acute severe anxiety. According to LifeStance Health, anyone can develop agoraphobia, and certain people may have a higher risk of developing it. You may be at a higher risk if you have another anxiety disorder, including panic disorder or a generalized anxiety disorder. You generally have a worried disposition or personality. You are a woman, you are under the age of 35, or you have a biological relative with agoraphobia. These risk factors do not guarantee that someone will get agoraphobia. They just make the risk higher. So how do you know if you have it? According to Anxiety Canada, you may have agoraphobia if individuals with agoraphobia avoid at least 2 of the types of situations mentioned above. For example, riding on buses and standing in line. The fear experienced is out of proportion to the situation. Avoiding a situation that is dangerous, i.e. in dangerous neighborhood, is not considered agoraphobia. So many would argue on this point, if they're so scared of COVID that they've developed agoraphobia, they wouldn't call it agoraphobia. They would say it's a justified fear, but the numbers don't pan that out. Some individuals with agoraphobia are able to enter these situations, but do so with extreme dread and discomfort. And once someone with agoraphobia begins avoiding certain situations, they often find themselves avoiding more and more of these situations until they are avoiding almost everything. Now, we've linked the Anxiety Canada's Mindshift app. You can check it out for helping to combat social anxieties and phobias in addition to other things like perfectionism. You can check that app out in the article on agoraphobia here. Now we move on. Audio. Tillsonburg pastor talks on why he will continue to hold services regardless of restrictions. Now, Diverge Media sat down with Tillsonburg pastor of Faith Presbyterian Church, Steve Richardson, who says he will continue to hold services regardless of government restrictions and fines. He was fined on December 29th for conducting an indoor service that exceeded the indoor limit of 10 people as per set by the province of Ontario. He was then issued with a court summons on February 7th. That matter is now before the courts. We asked, are you allowed to share your date for the court summons? He did. It is April 1st, 2021. Why do you believe the government keeps giving big box stores a pass but wants churches closed? He said their standard is the standard. Morality is decided by the government. They say it's safe to eat, but what they're saying is that the government decide what's safe and not safe. The government decide what's right and what's not right. So when it comes to the box stores and everything else, I don't know if there's a hidden agenda there. I do think that there is certainly principalities and powers at play, but certainly it is fascinating to see the public fearing. Now, do you believe these restrictions are a violation of Canadians' Charter of Rights and Freedoms? He said, yes, absolutely. Under the Charter, the freedom to practice our religion without interference, and at the moment, we are being interfered with. I've actually heard the question, well, your religious freedoms, they are not being interfered with. The irony, of course, is that those are not people that are familiar with our religion. They're people who wouldn't be able to recite the 10 Commandments. The CIV of truth is that we have a duty to obey God. We owe our allegiance to Jesus Christ, and he has commanded us to gather at least once a week to worship him and for prayer, for preaching, and for the administration of sacraments. And there's no church without gathering. There simply isn't, he said. So you can check out the rest of that audio interview here on divergemedia.ca under Tillsonburg Pastor, why he's continuing. We've posted in Talk Tillsonburg, very mixed response from residents in Tillsonburg area. Some very happy to see it, some very upset. But this is polarizing. Even in small towns, the COVID narrative has become extremely polarizing, even in those small rural communities where they're normally more tight-knit, you would say. So now we are going to go into the Yesterday's Gone report. It says there may be a shift to global workforces and implications for tax policy. Now, this was funded by the Government of Canada's Future Skills Centre, has 8 mega trends. Now, they have 8 trends in that report. Here's what they are. Our lives online, capitalism in question, technology to the rescue, climate and crisis, reconciliation and inclusion, finding meaning and well-being. Yes, the government wanted to know about that as well. Shifting power and evolving population. Our lives online had some interesting points. They talked about other trends that were grouped within were permanent remote work, rural boom, post-secondary, disrupted, and immersive digital leisure. In 2030, they said this could mean there could be greater social polarization between people who are able to work from home and those who are not. Workers may be able to participate in collaborative telepresence, making a full sensory immersion possible even from different locations. So they talk about this in the press release. Scientific American wrote about it. Collaborative telepresence could render distance relatively meaningless. So just as a video calling apps such as Skype and FaceTime have made what was the domain of business widely accessible to consumers, telepresence could transform how people collaborate virtually in business and beyond. So medical providers, for instance, will be able to work remotely with patients as if they were in the same room. And friends and families will be able to share experiences and being in a cozy room or touring a new city, even though they are not actually in the same place. So it's augmented reality and virtual reality are already becoming capable. And as this progress seems to develop more and more, along with the rollout of 5G networks to handle the masses of data from the sensors, innovators are perfecting technologies that enable people to physically interact with remote environments. So they're working on this and they're pushing towards it. Could be coming soon to a workplace near you, to the classrooms, etc. So potential workplace implications under this, they said there may be a shift to global workforces with implications for tax policy. They also said there could be a growth in mental health related services to respond to social isolation and burnout, as well as the loss of social capital and interpersonal skills. That's right. You heard it first. The government, in a report that they funded, is acknowledging that social isolation and burnout may lead to a loss of social capital and interpersonal skills. That is from the Government of Canada's Yesterday's Gone report, funded by the Future Skills Center, and that's under Trend 1, Our Lives Online, where they're talking about some implications. So here's another trend that stuck out to us: capitalism in question. So they go through degrowth. They say we could experience degrowth. What is degrowth? The concept of degrowth is focused on ecological goals and defines new metrics of economic progress. This has the potential to create a paradigm shift from a focus on GDP growth to a new system that prioritizes human well-being, environmental sustainability, and economic resilience. So nice wording and everything else, but basically degrowth is a shift away from the GDP system, and they want an entirely new system to an environmental, they say, one that prioritizes human well-being, environmental sustainability, and economic resilience. But we've seen what they do on the environmental front, promoting wind and solar when those require toxic minerals and oil to go through the process. Michael Moore's documentary slips my mind, but his most recent one talks about the fallacy of green energy. He calls for, I believe, a shift in reduction of goods in general. But here we are. They're talking about degrowth in this report, promoting it. Here's what they say it could mean in 2030. Governments may start tracking well-being and equity impact as important metrics. So what does that mean? No idea. But the well-being and equity impact as important metrics, it sounds like social credit. More employee-owned companies may emerge as an alternative to large multinational corporations. Reduced consumption and a focus on minimalism may result in reduced demand for retail and hospitality industries. The focus on minimalism part is interesting to me. The only reason there will be a focus on minimalism is because people don't have the ability to not be minimalistic. But anyways, we continue, and I digress. National sources of wealth could transition from selling resources and physical products to a greater emphasis on intellectual property. Now, there is a section in there titled titled Workers First, where they say formerly fringe ideas such as universal basic income and a wealth tax have been brought into mainstream politics. Doesn't this give you the warm and fuzzies, everyone? 50 senators signed an open letter to the Prime Minister calling for a basic income, and the Federal Liberal Party has discussed both policies publicly as approaches to spur Canada's economic recovery. Printing money does not spur economic recovery. It's like the paradigm or the fallacy of you can print your way into prosperity. You cannot. In 2030, this could mean adopted policies like UBI, they say, may lead to increased entrepreneurial and educational pursuits. There may be more flexibility for workers in terms of scheduling and location. They acknowledged, I thought this was interesting, potential labor market implications. A diminished luxury class could result in reduced demand for high-end incomes, services, and real estate. And they say wealth distribution policies could provoke high net worth individuals to leave the country, potentially contributing to a loss of talent. These are pretty wild things to acknowledge. They're acknowledging that these policies that they're talking about, UBI, could lead to the loss of high wealth or high net worth individuals, contributing to a loss of talent, could lead to a diminished luxury class, meaning reducing the high end of what you're able to attain. Again, I don't want the government's hand in my life. I just want them out of my life. I want solid money, solid currency, a safe society, and opportunity. That's it. And every time they go to get their hands in things, it sounds more and more like something else. Here they go again under capitalism in question, public services with a price tag. And we've been harping on this for a long time. So I want you to hear it from a government report. Hear what we've been saying through a government report. The economic crisis brought on by COVID-19 has led to record levels of government debt. In Canada, the pre-pandemic combined federal and provincial debt totaled $1.4 trillion. This debt has rapidly grown, with governments borrowing another $300 billion so far in 2020. In the coming years, this could result in cuts to services across Canada, potentially leading to a wave of privatization. What did I say? How long have I been saying that this economic consequences of locking down society and thinking it's going to be hunky-dory, okay, oh, we're all in this together and nothing changes, is asinine. We knew when we did this, there's economic consequences. Every action has a reaction, and the reaction to lockdowns is economic devastation of the economy. And I said it will likely lead to an increase in taxes. I said we've increased the debt to astronomical levels, and I said it will likely result in cuts to services. Doesn't this give you the warm and fuzzies, everyone? Here they are saying in the coming years, the economic crisis brought on by COVID-19 has led to record levels of government debt. Then they go on to say in the coming years, this could result in cuts to services across Canada, leading to a wave of privatization. That's where we're heading. So in 2030, this could mean, you ready? From the government themselves, out of a government-funded report, from the horse's mouth, if you will. Lower public sector budgets. Are you looking forward to that bright future? Keep advocating for lockdowns. Lower public sector budgets. In 2030, this could mean that lower public sector budgets might generate more innovative public-private partnerships or motivate new approaches to taxation. Notice that they just tried to basically put powdered sugar on a church sandwich. In 2030, this could mean lower public sector budgets, which might innovate more public-private partnerships. Oh, it's so great. Or motivate new approaches to taxation. Oh yeah, just focus on the middle part. Don't read the tail end that says they might approach new taxation methods. Anyways, I digress. Access to public services in smaller communities may become constrained. So access to public services in smaller communities may become constrained. So it sounds like there's going to be a squeeze to, and this might potentially drive people into the cities on public services to smaller communities. Not my words, the government's. In 2030, they say this could mean, as they're studying these various trends. This is according to a government-funded report. Privatized healthcare and education can lead to a more polarized and unequal societies and reduce social mobility. Potential labor market implications. Pressure on public sector budgets could reduce the number of mid-skilled public service jobs, which might further polarize the skill distribution. Privately owned citizen service offerings could continue to expand, for example, last mile transport, effectively taking over some government services. Interesting that this report acknowledges that there's likely to be privatization on the way because they can't afford to publicly pay for these things anymore. Now, another part here I want to talk about in the Yesterday's Gone report funded by the government of Canada, they have Trend 4, Climate and Crisis. Now, the preamble goes on to say this. From wildfires to flooding, the effects of the global climate crisis are accelerating fast, as are attempts to kickstart the growth of the green economy. Now, some things that stuck out to me in this report. Specifically under this trend, climate and crisis, they had something, I'm not joking, I'm not using hyperbole, called the green energy revolution. They say the MISO trend preamble says this: producing carbon-free energy has never been cheaper. Well, producing carbon-free energy has never been cheaper. That may be true. It doesn't mean it's the most efficient, but it sounds nice. The report preamble continues by stating, in Canada, investment in the green energy sector is expected to increase 46% by 2030, while recent private and public sector support in electric cars and trucks from across the political spectrum, such as automaker Ford's $1.8 billion investment that was backed by both the Ontario Conservatives and federal Liberals, suggest significant development in carbon-free transportation over the coming decade. So just because it's never, okay, notice it says it's never been cheaper to produce carbon-free energy, referring to green and solar. Well, I kind of have to laugh at this. Yeah, because technologies get better and more efficient over time, so it should be cheaper tomorrow, theoretically, or in 2 weeks than it is today, unless something happened in the market that would cause it to spike in price. Now, they're basically saying they expect there to be an increase of 46% by 2030 in the green energy sector, and that because of the political spectrum and seeing support in the public sector, like Ford's announcement of $1.8 billion investment, they say there's going to likely be significant, suggest that there will be significant development in carbon-free transportation over the coming decade. But they say in 2030, this can mean a wide-scale implementation of policies like carbon tariffs and tax cuts for green energy companies. So if you're a green energy company, you get a tax cut. They're going to start promoting it, and then carbon tariffs for other companies, a brown tax to punish the polluters, so to speak. This is where we're heading. So if you're a business that you do this, we're going to make you pay more, carbon tariffs. We may see increases in individual and corporate energy usage monitoring, time of use pricing. This should scare every Canadian senseless. Stop what you're doing right now and listen close. They're talking about in 2030, this could mean government-funded report, the use of rolling blackouts or social pressure to conserve energy. So I like how they used this very, very harsh term and idea. The use of rolling blackouts to see energy consumption go down. Are you kidding me? Or social pressure to conserve energy. Well, that's nice. That sounds like, or we'll just socially shame everyone into using less energy. Or if you don't do that, you don't follow along, we may use rolling blackouts to accomplish the reduction. This is in a government-funded report under Green Energy Revolution. None of the other mainstream media outlets have touched this yet. This was funded by the Government of Canada's Future Skills Centre. And here they are talking about wide-scale implementation of policies like carbon tariffs and tax cuts. They're talking about individual and corporate energy usage monitoring, time of use pricing. They're saying we could see increases in use of rolling blackouts. We may see increases in use of rolling blackouts or social pressure to conserve energy. Stop and let that sink in. Send this off to Rebel, send this off to Post Millennial, send this off to True North, send it off to every mainstream outlet. They missed one. They missed it, and it's a very important one not to miss. Right under your nose, Government of Canada funded, talking about we may see increases in use of rolling blackouts. We may see a change in global workforces and change in tax policy. On and on the list goes. This is you need to read these trends if you have not read these trends. We have it all broken down on divergemedia.ca. Go check it out there. Please, you need to understand what's being discussed in this report and why it's so important. They go through reconciliation and anti-racism, but I want to cover one more for everyone here. The Government of Canada funded a report studying a trend of finding meaning and well-being. I don't ever want to see the Government of Canada studying finding meaning and well-being. Just saying. They said the pandemic has exacerbated mental health issues in Canada and highlighted the growing imbalance between our professional and personal lives. They talk about vaccine identity. A November poll found that 25% of Canadians are strongly against the use of a vaccine. This is in direct conflict with the 60% of Canadians who are in favor of making the COVID-19 vaccine mandatory, the report says. It continues, as such, it is possible that the vaccination status of employees may become an increasingly important form of identification in the future and may impact access to education, employment, leisure activities, travel, and more. Stop, break it down. What are they telling me? It is possible. This is a government-funded report again. I can't stress that enough. Government-funded. It's not just a random report, something deep on the dark web. This is government-funded. They're exploring these trends. This is what they're saying. It is possible that the vaccination status of employees may become an increasingly important form of identification in the future. It may impact access to the education, employment, leisure activities, travel, and more. So your vaccination status as an employee may impact your access to education, employment. So your vaccination status may affect your education, employment, your ability to participate in leisurely activities, to travel, and more. Government funded a report telling you this. In 2030, they say it might be vaccination data might be more public than in the past, used by unexpected parties such as insurance brokers and financial planners. And they say it may also become common practice for employers to conduct 24/7 health and wellness surveillance of employees, including temperature, stress, physical activity, etc., driving new demand for data privacy policies. So they do acknowledge that there will be a pushback, but they don't say whether they're for or against. It says employment laws may need to change to clarify employee vaccination rights. Now, there's another meso trend, a smaller trend contained within this trend of finding meaning, called fear pathogens in people. They talk about the agoraphobia one. We've written an article about it breaking down, but there's another one in there. Another pandemic. This report says that the implications of another pandemic within the next decade, compounding the effects of the current health and economic crisis, would be severe and far-reaching. Why do they think there could be another pandemic within the next decade, compounding the effects of the current health and economic crisis? And they say it would be severe and far-reaching. I don't understand why we're even exploring this. Yes, it's good to be prepared, but why within the next decade? That's interesting that the timeline's on it, but they're just saying the implications within the next decade would compound it and would be far-reaching, but just interesting to know. It goes on to say, however, in Canada, the increase in public health R&D investments and rising societal trust in doctors and science may mitigate mitigate the impacts of future pandemic risk. So, in 2030, this could mean. They say substance abuse may increase as a consequence of the stress and anxiety caused by another pandemic. So they acknowledge that pandemics cause stress and anxiety. There could be, this part in 2030, there could be in 2030, according to this government report, permanent systems and designs in place to support social distancing. You don't like the social distancing? There could be permanent systems and designs in place to support social distancing by 2030. In 2030, this can mean, it says. So that's a little unnerving. So we'll leave that. They talk about China shifting power from the United States as the dominant superpower. It's been observed as moving more towards China. That's within this as well. Lots of other good stuff in here. They say under Gen Z takeover that there may be a rethinking of some of our most deep-rooted structures and institutions by 2030, just 9 years from now, such as democracy, capitalism, policing, full-time work, land ownership, and post-secondary education. If we're going to change the rethinking of our most deep-rooted structures like capitalism, why don't we just call it what it is? It's a revolution. If you're going to rethink these things, it's a revolution. Let's rethink democracy, capitalism, policing, full-time work, land ownership, and post-secondary education. Let's call it what it is. That sounds like communism. If you want to abolish capitalism, this is what they were talking about. They have capitalism in question is an entire trend within this report. They say capitalism has never existed without pushback. This is their commentary on the trend. But calls for change continue to escalate amidst growing climate change concerns and the unequal economic impacts of COVID-19. Other things that point to this being a revolution. The things they are talking about in this report. There may be growth in the field of pandemic response. Okay. It may become a struggle to attract talent to the hospitality, retail, and restaurant industries. Yeah, because you locked everything down and told everyone they're not essential at a moment's notice, and their livelihoods can be taken away from them. Of course. Just tell them and let them trust that you won't get involved in this way again in the future, that you'll handle it differently. But I digress. They say it will possibly necessitate government incentives to participate in them. They're talking about getting government involved in the retail, hospitality, and restaurant industries. That's communism. The government involvement in private enterprise. And they say there could be a mass small business closure, or there could be mass small business closures if owners see no hope for the future. Yeah, well, at least they acknowledge that. So this is a report. Again, I don't want to go through everything in here, but there's so much in here. From digital IDs, the concept of citizenship may no longer be tied to geographic location. The United Nations talking about being more involved as a support for global workers' rights. Talking about calling into question capitalism, climate and crisis, green energy revolution. Like they're talking about revolution. They're talking about communistic policies, the taking over of public businesses to get involved with the government, shifting of to global workforces with implications for global tax policy, calling into question capitalism, calling in for degrowth and a degrowth. It's for a paradigm shift from a GDP growth system to one that prioritizes human well-being, environmental sustainability, and economic resilience. They're calling for a revolution. And so the UBI is included in this. Wealth tax is included in this. They're talking about those under the workers first, and then saying in 2030 there could be a UBI. They say there could be a diminished luxury class. They even acknowledge that their wealth distribution policies could provoke high net worth individuals to leave the country. They acknowledge that there will be lower public sector budgets. Pressure on public sectors directly there. Talking about the use. We may see increases in use of rolling blackouts or social pressure to conserve energy. There could be wide-scale implementation of policies like carbon tariffs and tax cuts. But the use of rolling blackouts to conserve energy. Wow. Demand for batteries may go up. Yeah, if you're going to force everyone into electric vehicles, where most people won't be able to afford an electric vehicle anyways. But in vaccination may be may be required for access to education, employment, leisure activities, travel, and more. May impact access to, it says under this report. Government-funded report again. Just completely missed by those in the mainstream media, it seems, to this point, and the independent media as a result, as well. They're saying in 2030 there could be permanent systems and designs in place to support social distancing in this government-funded report. So all this here, it smells of a complete change to society. They're talking about, like, let's go here. They're talking about rethinking our most deep-rooted structures, such as democracy, capitalism, policing, full-time work, land ownership, and post-secondary education. Does that not sound like revolution? Let's rethink capitalism and democracy. It sounds like something I know. Again, read this one, spread it out, share the heck out of this article, share the heck out of this video. People need to understand this is going on right under our nose. And I don't know that anybody's heard about it. And that concerns me. So we're going to close off here. I got one more story for you about Trudeau's new gun safety measures. I'm going to outline what those are, what you can expect, and then I'll close. And I'm asking you, the viewer, to please share this video as much as you can. I can't stress this enough. My reach is dependent on your willingness to share this information out. I don't get any help from the YouTube or Facebook algorithms. We're independent media. We're dedicated to the truth. We need your help to help promote this story and inform Canadians and the world about the thoughts and ideas that are going through this government, that are being tossed around in a government-funded report. So gun owners are targeted again as Prime Minister Trudeau introduces new firearms measures. It would allow municipalities to introduce bylaws that restrict storage and transportation. Yeah, you thought 1,500 guns being banned outright was ludicrous? Well, it gets crazier. The Prime Minister of Canada released a press release today saying that the proposed legislation and other measures of the government would combat intimate partner and gender-based violence by creating a red flag and yellow flag laws. These laws would allow people such as concerned friends or relatives to apply to the courts for the immediate removal of an individual's firearms, or to ask a chief firearms officer to suspend and review an individual's license to own firearms. They say they're going to fight gun smuggling and trafficking by increasing criminal penalties and enhancing the capacity of the RCMP and the Border Services Agency to combat illegal importation of firearms. All for it, provided it's put in the right places, not wasted and squandered. Help create safer communities by supporting municipalities that ban handguns through the bylaws restricting storage and transportation in their jurisdictions. Individuals who violate these municipal bylaws would be subject to federal penalties, including license revocation and criminal sanctions. So basically, if you lived in an area that decided they're not going to allow handgun storage or transportation anymore, you would have to pay for your gun to be stored somewhere else, or you could be fined and have your license revoked and possible criminal sanctions levied against you. So this is ludicrous. This is asinine, out of hand, and it creates a patchwork where you could have completely different frameworks of what's acceptable for handguns in particular across the country. Protect Canadians from gun violence by creating new offenses So there will be new offenses for altering the cartridge magazine component of a firearm and depicting violence in firearms advertising. I'm curious to know what they mean by violence in firearms advertising and what would qualify. They also want to introduce an introduction of tighter restrictions on imports of ammunition and ensuring the prohibition of imports, export, sales, and transfers of all replica firearms. So I didn't catch that the first time around, but restrictions on imports of ammunition. I don't know how much of our ammunition for our weapons here are actually made in Canada, but that could be a huge issue driving the cost of ammunition up depending on the breakdown. Don't know for sure. That's just opinion. Maybe somebody who knows guns better and is an owner of one can inform me in the comments section below. There will be they will complete the prohibition of assault style firearms, they say. So in June of 2019, they implemented their new gun measures of the ban of 1,500, they say, assault style firearms. It was ludicrous. But now they're saying they want to offer a gun buyback program for that. So not really in favor of it. Don't think they're worth their money. You can check out our work on divergemedia.ca. We are 100% viewer and reader supported. So if you would like to support independent Canadian media that is dedicated to bringing you the stories that matter and touching on things that other media outlets maybe don't touch on, are overlooked by some others, we will bring you that information like our Yesterday's Gone report. If you want to support us, you can do so by donating at divergemedia.ca, or you can get one of these hats and it will ship it right to your door through Canada Post at our online merch shop on our website as well. Thank you for watching. We post videos every Tuesday and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we'll see you next time.